Well, everyone, the fated day is finally upon us. The time has arrived to talk about Forspoken, the first big game of 2023, a game developed by Luminous Productions of Final Fantasy XV fame and published by Square Enix. Also, a game that I have now played and want to talk to all of you about. So, what I'm gonna do is prattle on a bit about this game and tell you some of what's good about it, what's bad about it, and what's just an indifferent fact. So, let's go ahead and jump into things. But before we get fully immersed in discussion, I do have to address the elephant in the room, the dialogue. If you follow video games at all, you've probably seen someone talking about how horrible Forspoken's dialogue is, or how horrible Forspoken is altogether as a result of its dialogue. This has been happening long before the game ever even came out, and I want to very quickly address it because in this case, the dialogue ultimately has very little impact on whether this game is or isn't good. So, does this game have any cringy or bad dialogue? Yes, although it's way less than you'd think based on the internet, and it's far from peak cringe. I've played games with much shittier dialogue, like I don't really know why people are acting like this is so unforgivably terrible. Have you ever played a Final Fantasy game? They often have some bad dialogue. Final Fantasy XII has some of the most poorly written dialogue and character writing maybe ever in a video game. Okay, that might be excessive, but it's really fucking bad. I'm not kidding. But is Final Fantasy XII a bad game? Fuck no. That's not how this works. This isn't a movie. Gameplay is king. If you have a great story and writing, that's awesome and can definitely elevate a game, but the bulk of the critical weight when it comes to a video game is the gameplay, for me. And beyond that, I just find it a little weird that we decide to dogpile this game's dialogue like Stranger of Paradise didn't release recently with very shitty dialogue, and everyone just loved it. Oh, we love how bad this is. It's hilarious. Oh, we love campy B-movie dialogue in Resident Evil. Oh, we love Kingdom Hearts and the cringe-inducing speeches about friendship or whatever. But Forspoken? No, we draw the line at this CW-esque isekai shock and awe dialogue. This is where we take our stand. Like, what the fuck are we actually talking about? You know, pick a lane. Do you like bad dialogue or not? But whatever. Anyway, let's get into the actual true blue points of this game. And you know what, guys? This might sound like a funny comparison, but Forspoken reminds me a lot of Sonic Frontiers. It really does. They're very stylistically similar because, like Sonic Frontiers, Forspoken is an open world game, and that open world is very basic. You know, there's not a lot in the way of flow. That is to say, one point of interest doesn't put a landmark in your line of sight which leads you to another point of interest, which might be a dungeon that leads you to a new area once you come out the other side and all that kind of thing. That is not here. That doesn't exist. No, there's none of that. It doesn't come off like it's that well thought out. There's just a lot of land. There's some shit to do. There's good mobility, so it's fun to move around. So just move around, do some shit, and have some fun. This is what Sonic Frontiers was. This is what this game is. And sorry, but I think I'm just gonna pretty much keep comparing Forspoken to Sonic Frontiers for the rest of this video. What can I say? That's the ballpark we're playing in. The comparison is way too apt. Now, as you might have guessed, this game has a better story than Sonic does, but that's not hard to do. And Forspoken's story does have a few genuinely good moments, but at what cost? You see, while both Forspoken and Sonic are quite similar, Sonic more or less just gets straight to the fucking point. Oh, you know, you're Sonic on some island, blah blah blah, go spin dash things. Cool. We don't really need much more than that in what is a very basic game. You know, just let a basic game be a basic game. It's fine. Forspoken, however, takes its sweet time getting started, and ending for that matter. The beginning and ending of this game are so incredibly slow with long, drawn-out exposition dumps where you're just standing around being told about things doing nothing. They don't even bother to put this stuff in entertaining cinematics. No, it's just you standing there listening to jabbering that cannot possibly remain interesting for as long as it goes on. This is really an issue in the beginning of the game, for like the first 3 hours to be more precise. Luckily, once you finally get some freedom, you can run around and see what little points of interest have to offer and what every little monument or whatever does. And while you're finally getting to stretch your legs, you're definitely gonna want to do all the fighting you can after standing around listening to people talk. And here's something Forspoken does better than Sonic. Combat. Sonic is a platformer franchise, so combat is not his strong suit, so you may have guessed that Forspoken does it better. And in Forspoken, you start off with one set of magical abilities that's focused on plants and geomancy. So, you're shooting rocks at stuff, you're summoning flowers to shoot rocks at stuff, you're binding and slapping enemies with vines, all that jazz. Now, it did feel to me like I only had this single limited set of powers for way too long, so I was starting to get bored because I felt I should have gotten a new set of abilities sooner, but that could just be a result of me spending too much time in the optional parts of the game so early on, so I'm hesitant about that particular critique. And speaking of the optional parts of the game, I have to say that I did enjoy some of the more dungeon-like side activities. I believe they're called labyrinths, and although they aren't all that labyrinthian, they are pretty fun. I mean, it's mostly straightforward fights in several big rooms, but there are usually tons of enemies, and the labyrinths always end with these big spectacle boss fights. The fight arenas usually look good, and so do the bosses, which is refreshing considering how most of the enemy designs in this game are quite bad. They're just basic, drab, unimaginative opponents, not unlike Sonic Frontiers. But where Sonic had you fighting super basic Unreal Engine sample polygon men as enemies, Forspoken has you fighting just real life animals. Like I'm supposed to, be all awe-stricken, like, oh, holy shit, it's a stag. Like, dude, no, I don't care. I know what animals look like. Like, it's really just like birds and badgers and shit, and like, maybe they have their bones sticking out because, ooh, they're monsters. Like, whatever. The enemy design outside of some of the fairly cool labyrinth bosses are mostly pretty bad. Now, every now and again, the decent combat of this game will just click into place and feel really exceptional for a brief moment. And it was tough to put my finger on, but this happens when you're up against something that creates a scenario where the most logical decision is to swap between your magic sets and do cool combos. And I specifically mean when it is logical to do that, when there's a need for it, because you can always swap and combo, but it's rarely ever needed. So when it is needed and you're quickly swapping between sets and creating this huge magical spectacle of elements, those are the few and fleeting moments of this game's combat getting to shine. And it's a shame that there isn't more of that need on display. A couple of the main cinematic bosses are really fun and really good and well executed, even if they don't necessarily evoke that challenge. It couldn't have hurt to also have given them some of that extra sauce. And after you get into a groove of kind of doing what you do in open world games and you're playing Forspoken and you're having a good time and you're getting used to all the cool things you could do with the combat once you really get into it, you hit a point near the end of the game where Forspoken just starts dragging its feet and dumping exposition at you with very little in the way of gameplay, with a healthy amount of that exposition being largely superfluous, just making for a wide stretch of boredom in the player. All in all, Forspoken is a pretty unastounding but inoffensive typical open world game that I think kind of appropriately sets the stage for a year that will be filled with games of all different qualities by the end of it. And Forspoken sets the stage well to me by being the first big release and being decidedly mid as fuck. I think Sonic Frontiers was a hearty 6.5 of a game, and all things considered, despite competent combat, I think the sheer boredom of the opening and near end of Forspoken really drag it down, and its failure to get to the point make it just that little bit worse than Sonic Frontiers. So if I had to put a number on it, I could confidently say a 6 out of 10. You know, it's not bad, it's fine, it's solid, but it's not doing anything amazing, not doing anything you haven't seen before, really. If you're not really jonesing for something to play right at this moment, then I'd advise waiting for a sale rather than paying the full $70 price tag for this game. That's honestly a bit steep for what's on offer here. And you know what, for all the hype around the game's dialogue, it doesn't really move the needle one way or the other for me. There are games with far worse dialogue and bigger budgets, and there are games with far better dialogue but are just shittier games. But that's just my opinion. And in fact, everyone's opinions are wrong because there are cats in this game. That's right, I said it, cats. And if we learned anything from Stray, then Forspoken is actually Game of the Year. But okay, that's all from me. Hope you enjoyed this little chat. Let me know what you think. Did you play Forspoken? Did you enjoy it? Are you gonna play it? Are you not? All of that, let me know. And feel free to tell me how wrong and stupid I am in the comments. It's fine. But until next time, I am Waifu Collector. I'm just a normal guy. I like hentai. And I'm happy to say that 2023 is just getting started. Goodbye.